He clung to that core identity, that breath of a memory that made him who he was, or had been. Even as he melted into the mass of it, as his mind stretched and stretched until it was ready to snap, he clung to it. And when he was no more, and he became them, he still held it, small and secret, in the empty space of his previous existence. They, the monstrosity, felt that identity, small and hard, like a kernel in their teeth, annoying but bearable. They couldn't absorb it, couldn't swallow it down into the acid of a dozen stomachs. But it wasn't that much of a bother. It was why he knew himself, even as the bullets pierced the flesh that he had become, snuffing out parts of a whole until they were nothing. But he knew himself, damn it. He knew himself in death, and that was better than nothing. Calvin Green had dreamt of being a hockey player. He had spent his childhood with blades cutting through the ice and his breath fogging the mountain air. Calvin might have made the minor leagues. Hell, he might have been a decent fourth liner in the NHL, had he not caught Umbral's eye. He was a good hockey player, but he was a phenomenal navigator and tracker as well. The talent had first become apparent in the Scouts, and it grew to the point that he was being hired as a freelance navigator by local police departments and search organizations. Calvin never figured out where Umbral heard about him first, but by the time he was curious enough to ask that question, his time had run out. At 18, they had taken him from his home and plied him with the same offer they did everyone else. Join us and be rewarded. Don't. You'll pay, and so will your family. And considering that they snatched him out of his front yard, he knew that they were serious. That was how Calvin Green, now codenamed Atlas, had ended up on the Eclipse Initiative team, Wings, which led him to be dumped in the jungle to help locate a civilian search team that had vanished. It was so ordinary, as far as Eclipse Initiative jobs went, that he hadn't even blinked at the assignment. Wings was the second Eclipse team to have visited the area. Ares had been there first, but Atlas didn't know a single thing about what the first team had found. He didn't care either. Atlas was a good soldier. They didn't find anything the first night, and set up camp far enough away from the original site of Viridian Lab that he felt relatively safe. The dreams had started that night. An alien horizon, the sky a sick, bruised purple, moons he didn't recognize wheeling across the sky. Along with them was the vast, aching sense of loneliness. It was so intense he woke up, crawling across the ground to one of his squad mates and grabbing their ankle, just to ease that feeling of being so damned alone. The other soldier didn't complain. Through the darkness and the cacophony of singing insects, he heard the other man whisper, "I feel it too." It was noon, but the minutes crawled by like hours.
Calvin.
The husk of a voice had been talking to him since the sun rose. It was a sound he could feel against his spine. It didn't take long for the others to notice, but they were dealing with secret demons of their own. He tried to pretend like he didn't hear the whispers, and he told himself that the others were humoring him when they didn't mention the way his head would turn suddenly, listening for a noise that was too loud to be real. It bounced around the inside of his head, like a pinball, After 3 more hours, his hands shaking with a fine tremor that wouldn't go away, they found the remains of the search team, or what was left of them. It took them a while to figure out that the twisted shapes in the bushes were human bodies. It was the bright colors of clothing that had given them away. But the numbers were off. There weren't enough bodies to account for how large the civilian team had been. The whispers had gotten louder and louder the closer they had gotten. The words had become clearer.
Calvin.
Now there was a voice, 1,000 voices, all of them speaking together.
Atlas.
At the edge of the forest, he looked back and saw his team watching him, their eyes wide and horrified.
Come, join us,
they said. The whispers echoed through his brain. He sounded like his team, the rest of the men and women that he had fought alongside, his friends, his brothers and sisters. Yes, the voices whispered, and the world turned inside out. He was falling, or rather, the forest was falling around him. The trees collapsed in on themselves, a whirlpool of bark and leaf, the earth sinking into the pit of a vast yawning maw. He stood at the center, the only still point in the madness, as the sky folded itself down like origami and the ground disappeared beneath his feet. The world was gone, replaced with a vast and endless darkness. Atlas fell, his arms wrapped around his knees as if to protect himself from the nothing that surrounded him. There was no light, but there was the wet sound of something large, shifting and sucking and shuddering. And between it all, the agonized sound of muffled voices. It smelled like wet earth, and everything echoed. The walls and ceiling were all too close. Beneath his hands, that he placed on the ground to stand, was damp stone. A cave. His hand fumbled against his gear, and he realized he was still wearing his rifle. He had a flashlight on his vest. He found it, his fingers shaking, and flicked it on. The cavern was immense, a vast cathedral, the ceiling far above. There was an alien organic quality to the room, as if the rock had grown around the shape of a great mouth or an egg. The walls were curved and uneven, and they glinted in the weak light. He shone the light down into the depths and saw a shape curled at the bottom. It was enormous, a mass of dark flesh covered in eyes and mouths and grasping hands. He saw hair and clothing and jewelry. And there, all of the eyes focused on him, unblinking. You, the creature hissed, and it rose from the pit, its form unfurling, its tentacles reaching up, towards him.
Come, Calvin,
the creature said, its voice sweet and full of longing. Atlas lifted his gun. He had seen the remains of his friends. He had heard the screaming. No! He opened fire. 5 shots. And then he was full of sorrow, so vast and overwhelming that it dragged him to his knees. The flesh thing reached until it touched him. Just a little. At the contact, all the terrible things that had ever existed in the history of time bloomed in his mind. Misery, pure and uncut, pummeled him. Then the loneliness, hollowing him out, making him scream with the need to belong. Oh God, he thought, I need I need to be with it. I need to be in it. I need to become part of it. I need to go home. Then the creature let him go, and his vision swam. He felt the thing moving within his head. A few moments later, the creature spoke, its voices 1,000, 1,000,000. Come, Calvin. We can save your team. He didn't move.
Come, Calvin. I know the way out.
And Atlas knew the way out too. He could see it, the map clear in his head, a path that he could follow. He could get his team out. He could save them. They were screaming, and he was the only one left. The others had already been taken, the monster calling their names, and the poor souls had fallen into the pit and let it take them. They had melted into the creature, a new layer, a new organ, a new set of limbs. They had begged him to join them. Atlas shook. He had fought, his bullets tearing the creature open, but the wounds had healed. No. His 5 desperate shots had ricocheted off stone, like he had been compelled to miss. And the more the creature had taken, the more its voices had changed. It was still them. He recognized the sound of his friends, the cadence of their speech. He had known his team well. It had been hard not to. They had spent so much time together in the Eclipse Initiative, living and fighting and training until they were almost seamless. They had become a family, and now they were calling him, begging him. "No!" he yelled, his voice rough and raw. He heard the thing sigh. "You know you have no choice, Calvin. You will fall. You will melt and be reborn, and you will know bliss. It's time to come home now." "Home," he whispered, and he closed his eyes. He remembered a time years ago, before the jungle, when he had been happy and he had not known fear. He heard his team calling his name, pleading. But it was the memory of his mother singing to him, her voice low and soft that he held on to, as the creature rose out of the pit.
Calvin.
The monster whispered, its voices 1,000.
Come.
He remembered her, his mother, her voice a balm, and he remembered his childhood and the ice and the blades, the slap of a puck echoing off the mountainside. "No," he whispered. "Not this time." The monster loomed above him, and he lifted his rifle and fired. And as the last bullet hit its mark, as he felt the world folding in on itself, his body falling into the darkness, his mother's song was still in his ears. "It's time to go home," he said, the words barely a breath, his voice a whisper. "Home, home," the monster chanted. His hand slipped away from the gun and he smiled. Never alone. Atlas's hand brushed the ground and his fingertips trailed across the dirt and stone. Then his hand dissolved, sank inward, and Chimera wrapped him inside itself. Calvin Green, codename Atlas, breathed his last, and the universe moved on, unbothered. Chimera inhaled, hundreds of different mouths and gills at once, and then let their air whoosh out again. The node they had tried to craft, an amalgamation of humans, was dead, ended by something so familiar, The same group of minds that had taken him from Viridian in the first place. And Howard. Always Howard. There at Chimera's darkest hours. And if they had their way, at their true rebirth too. But for now, Chimera let the pain of loss roll over them. The Viridian node loss feeling like a burning excision. It hurt, but they were so new at this. Born into a hive mind of millions, now trying to craft their own. It was agony. Chimera pulled away from the Viridian node, the mass of flesh and blood and bone, but stopped at the last second. There was something left, a little jewel of self hovering there in the void. One of their additions had, apparently, been strong enough to cling to their individual identity till the very end, curled in on itself and nearly gone, but intact. Curious, Chimera reached out and absorbed the little jewel. Calvin Green flowed into Chimera, and like rain sinking into the sand, he was consumed.